I grew up in California, and when I read that Proposition 8 was on the ballot, I was disappointed because it seemed to be inconsistent with the spirit of the state, with the independence and diversity of the frontier that California has always been. I have sporadic OCD cleaning moments around the house, but then I get lazy and I'm cured. It's a very inconsistent personality trait. Many witnesses to the shooting of Michael Brown made statements inconsistent with other statements they made and also conflicted with the physical evidence. Some were completely refuted by the physical evidence. The practice of executing such offenders is a relic of the past and is inconsistent with evolving standards of decency in a civilized society. Wrong fails because it is wrong. The wrongs, the untruths, are inconsistent with each other. They clash against each other and confute each other. They neutralize each other and are lost. I think it's inconsistent to tell the American people that you oppose the war and, yet, you continue to vote to fund the war. Because every time you vote to fund the war, you're reauthorizing the war all over again. If mothers are our first teachers, then having a narcissistic one teaches us that human closeness is terrifying, and the world is a heartless, inconsistent place. I think people can tell when you're pandering to them, and they feel insulted. I think that one thing that is really nice about the work that I do is that I can just sort of make mistakes or try out different ideas or be inconsistent and be vulnerable. One individual doesn't really accept the pro-life position of the party, and the other says he supports it and takes a position that is logically inconsistent. Each man has an equal social right to multiply his power of motion by all the social factors of civilization. Private property in any of these factors is inconsistent with this fundamental right. It must, obviously, prove a source of economic despotism and industrial slavery. One consistent thing in an otherwise inconsistent career is that I've always been passionate about Parliament. He's a man who, well, one of the great things about Shakespeare is that his characters are inconsistent, and that's something I think makes him a writer above most writers because inconsistency is what we, as people, are full of. We maybe don't see it in ourselves too often, but we are inconsistent. We've moved so much, and my life has been so inconsistent. If I actually invited someone to make a documentary about me, and I said, anything goes, and then I refused to answer any questions, that would be inconsistent. One of the biggest lessons I've learned is that there has got to be a reason for what you're doing. You actually have to care about what you're doing. The business has to be about something. Whatever the point of it is does not have to be inconsistent with making money, but usually if that's the sole reason, it is not very successful. In 2012, the Liberal Party affirmed overwhelmingly at the policy convention that we are a pro-choice party. It means that we are a party that defends women's rights, and therefore, it would be inconsistent for any Liberal MP to be able to vote to take away women's rights. The Obama administration has been weak and inconsistent in enforcing immigration laws. I think nobody since has written such extraordinary work as Shakespeare writes. The characters he writes are full of inconsistencies, which is a great human quality. I mean, we're all very inconsistent in the way we behave. Researchers who examined the voting records of wine judges found that 90% of the time they give inconsistent ratings to a particular wine when they judge it on multiple occasions. My work with Patriot Voices actually dovetails very well into the work I'm going to be doing with Ecolite. I'll be traveling around the country, doing a lot of radio interviews, a lot of media interviews, so I don't see that as all inconsistent. The hypothesis of matters being at first evenly spread through the heavens is, in my opinion, inconsistent with the hypothesis of innate gravity without a supernatural power to reconcile them, and therefore, it infers a deity. Absurdity, n, a statement or belief manifestly inconsistent with one's own opinion. Americans oppose Obamacare because they understand that it is inconsistent with our liberties and our idea of limited government and that it will destroy the best healthcare system in the world. Umpires, like players, are expected to show constant improvement each season and at each level. Inconsistent plate work and the inability to handle situations are probably the two biggest problems that minor league umpires face. There are peaks and valleys in anything, and that is especially true for the music business. It is very inconsistent. But if you are wise, you can let those downs really bring you to another level of your personality. I find it completely irrational to say someone who stands up for life for children is taking the life of adult. It's completely inconsistent with the values of the pro-life movement that are very passionate about protecting life, not taking life. I've addressed this before, and I'll say it again, the league has to take a long, hard look at full-time officials. The officiating has been inconsistent all season long. Conquest is not in our principles, it is inconsistent with our government. I don't say very much I don't really think through. I know that sounds inconsistent with Joe Biden. The biggest lesson that I've learned is that fashion is this tightrope where you have to be consistent but inconsistent. You need the connective thread but at the same time you need a sense of surprise. In the ordinary affairs of life we do not require nor expect demonstrative evidence, because it is inconsistent with the nature of matters of fact, and to insist on its production would be unreasonable and absurd. There is nothing inconsistent about having a conservative outlook and being vigorous. I do not want to put U.S. companies in a position where their competitors are behaving in a way that is inconsistent with the way they are required to behave. That is neither fair, nor will it solve the problem. I retired from public business from a thorough conviction that it was not in my power to do any good, and very much disgusted with measures, which appeared to me inconsistent with common policy and justice. I am pro-choice, but I don't consider that inconsistent at all with pro-life. There's no way that having an abortion, ever, is an easy decision, and it more often errs on the side of absolutely wrenching, not to mention physically debilitating. But the debt limit obviously is something that needs to and will be passed. That is not inconsistent with a process and a belief that we have to get significant deficit reduction. It's not that our family has no taste, it's just that our family's taste is inconsistent. Small business owners are experiencing great uncertainty because of the possibility of tax increases, the inconsistent flow of credit, an outrageous national debt, high energy costs, and overreaching federal regulations. 2014 wasn't my finest year. I was a bit inconsistent. I did too much training and got a bit overtired. It's the way I am, and sometimes I overtrain. A great epiphany. I found out that I'm totally confused and I'm good with that. I'm consistently inconsistent. I'm all of the above. I'm okay. I'm a work in progress. That's my next tattoo somewhere. Computers were programmed to swap out error-prone, inconsistent human calculation with digital perfection. Fidelity to conscience is inconsistent with retiring modesty. If it be so, let the modesty succumb. It can be only a false modesty which can be thus endangered. Between two groups of people who want to make inconsistent kinds of worlds, I see no remedy but force. I've had people say I'm inconsistent, and sure, I've never held a UFC or WEC title. I have always marched to my own beat, and most frequently, it was inconsistent not only with my own immediate family, but with my culture as well. My mother saw nothing inconsistent in her traditional desire to look after her husband and children and her radical politics. She began her civil rights work before most people had ever heard the word feminism, and in those early years, she was focused on racial justice. The first time that I was elected I was called the Judas Iscariot of the black community because I took a stand that was inconsistent of cutting across the grain. My instinct is to assume that we consumers are an inconsistent bunch. We like competition if it delivers low prices, but grumble if it delivers the bad news that prices need to go up. When I was a kid, everything was so unplanned, my parents were so erratic, and my world was so inconsistent. Naturalism aimed at giving the primitive wishes full play but failed because these wishes are too primitive, too infantile, too inconsistent with themselves to be satisfied even by the greatest license. Visit our website for more quotes, quoting.com.